My fiancé of years had been giving me the cold shoulder at a high society banquet he publicly proposed to his first love. Later I posted an announcement online brimming with sweetness, getting married soon. That same night he called me Wallace. I never said I was marrying you. I chuckled lightly and replied, I never said the groom was you. Shortly after, a set of photos went viral shocking the city. The man who held immense power in this town had his arms open, letting me fall into his embrace. He even lowered his head willingly, allowing me to kiss him as I finished putting on my dress and stood up. The makeup artist couldn't help but gasp, Miss Wallace, you look stunning in that gown. I softly thanked her as I stepped out. I noticed a commotion downstairs. Through the grand golden revolving doors came my fiancé of 3 years, Cyril, arm in arm with a young and beautiful woman. Even more ridiculous was that her dress was identical to mine. Tonight was an unprecedented grand event in decades. The guests, all standing at the apex of society, were sharp-eyed and discerning. It took only a glance for them to notice that my dress was merely a cheap imitation. In my years, this was the first time I had dressed up so elegantly, only to play the role of a lavishly dressed clown. Cyril, who is this lady beside you? Someone asked. Cyril clasped the woman's hand and replied, this is my girlfriend Stacy. After tonight she'll be my fiancée. And Miss Wallace? The person pressed. Cyril turned to me coldly and said, our engagement has been annulled for the past years. My family has already been more than generous to yours. He wasn't wrong. Without the $1 billion betrothal gift at the time of our engagement, my family's company would have gone bankrupt long ago. Could my parents, siblings, and I still enjoy our current luxurious lives? Cyril knelt on one knee, pulled out a diamond ring, and proposed to Stacy. She burst into tears and threw herself into his arms. He gently wiped her tears, comforting and kissing her. I watched as Stacy was surrounded by socialites who eagerly fawned over her. After tonight she would no longer be an obscure actress or a mistress scorned by society, and I, Wallace, would likely lose my place in this city, and even in my family. Could you move aside? A voice came from behind me. I turned around to see 2 socialite girls holding dessert plates looking at me. Impatiently I stepped aside. Her dress looked so cheap. Yeah, who knows what kind of material was used, might even cause an allergic reaction, and she still has the nerve to stand here. How embarrassing. Expressionless, I walked toward a corner seating area, pretending not to hear their malicious remarks. My phone buzzed and I answered. My mother's angry voice came through. Wallace, if the engagement is off, we have to return $1 million. You're such a failure for not holding on to a man's heart for years. Find a way to pay it yourself. Don't expect me to help. I stared at the disconnected call, my chest tightening painfully. The dazzling lights and glamorous outfits around me felt worlds away. All I wanted was to escape. I heard Mr. Egbert returned yesterday and will attend tonight's banquet. That's unlikely. Mr. Egbert rarely shows up at events like this. Pressing my aching chest, I opened my bag to look for medicine. The sound of my rummaging startled the 2 who had been speaking. Their conversation stopped and their footsteps gradually receded. The pain in my chest turned into spasms and the corset of my gown felt suffocating. I fumbled with the hidden clasps, trying to breathe, but my newly done nails, beautiful yet useless, made it impossible to undo the clasps. Gasping for air, my hair disheveled, I collapsed onto the deck. My lips had turned a sickly gray-white. Nearby the banquet was in full swing. My ex-fiancé and his beloved were likely dancing sweetly, while I might silently die here on this quiet deck. Sir, are you going in now? Egbert didn't respond. Taking the cigarette case handed to him by his assistant, he lit a cigarette. After dipping its tip in a fine spice powder, I'll finish the cigarette first, he said, walking toward the deck railing. The group around him tactfully left, knowing not to disturb him as he smoked. He noticed a frail figure not far away. He was about to turn away, but stopped at the sound of a dull thud on the deck. Turning back, he saw someone collapsed under the dim moonlight, a sight both helpless and strangely alluring. My face was probably ghostly pale by then. Under the faint moonlight, I must have looked twisted and unrecognizable, but seeing the stranger in front of me felt like grabbing onto a lifeline. I clutched his sleeve tightly, using all my remaining strength to pull his hand to my chest, breathing heavily. My heart rate erratic, I could barely speak. He glanced at me and seemed to understand my condition. Kneeling, he firmly grasped my wrist and asked calmly, "Where's the zipper on your dress?" I couldn't respond, struggling instead to guide his hand to my chest. His brows furrowed slightly as he removed my hand and looked at my dress's neckline with DEA fingers. He undid the intricate row of clasps. Relief washed over me as the constriction around my chest disappeared, and I greedily inhaled the fresh air. I'd completely forgotten that beneath my dress I wore only adhesive petals over my chest. Now, with the front of my gown undone, I had been entirely exposed. It wasn't until a man's jacket, still warm, draped over me that I snapped back to reality. Biting my lip, I looked up and whispered, "Thank you, can you stand?" I nodded, clutching the jacket with one hand and steadying myself on the railing with the other. "Should I contact your family or a friend for you?" I shook my head hastily. "No, I'll be fine." After resting for a bit, his phone suddenly rang. I saw him step aside to take the call. "I told you I'll handle the marriage arrangements myself. Don't worry, I won't let Grandpa leave this world with regrets." He seemed slightly irritable, lighting another cigarette. The glow from the cigarette illuminated his sharp features, and a thought struck me. I had seen him somewhere before. As he hung up and turned back toward me, our eyes met. I quickly averted my gaze, noticing my discomfort with the cigarette smoke. He extinguished it and gestured toward the jacket. "Just hand the jacket to a staff member later." My face flushed as I nodded and whispered, "Okay." His gaze lingered on my hands, clutching his jacket. Inside, my gown was undone, with only the adhesive petals shielding my skin. An intimacy no one else could perceive hung in the air. Feeling self-conscious, I hunched slightly. Just as he was about to leave, I softly called out, "I just heard your phone earlier. Can I make a deal with you?" I gathered the courage to lift my eyes to look at him. "Maybe he needs a wife, someone trouble-free who can disappear at any time, and I need $1 million to buy my pitiful freedom." "A deal? What kind of deal would Miss Wallace like to make with me?" I was so nervous I didn't even notice he knew my name. "Do you need a wife?" I mustered all my courage and stared at him steadily. "I won't cause you any trouble. I'll do my best to cooperate, of course, and when you don't need me I won't be a bother." He looked at me under the moonlight, wearing a silver-gray shirt and dark trousers, his lean but tall body wrapped in them. His brows were soft, but his jawline was sharp. I noticed the watch on his wrist. It probably cost as much as the luxurious cruise ship I was on. "What's your condition?" I froze for a moment, feeling embarrassed, and spoke slowly. "I need $1 million for what?" I lowered my lashes, unable to meet his gaze, but in front of a stranger it almost felt like I could show my helplessness and awkwardness. Reputation? What do you mean by that? I smiled faintly. "At tonight's banquet, I met a wealthy foreign businessman after hearing about my situation. He's willing to pay the $50 million, but he has a wife and kids, so I can only be his mistress." I really had no other choice but to agree. "But once that happens, when we appear together, our relationship will no longer be a secret." "How could you do something so shameless?" "Yeah, if you become his mistress, we'll be the laughing stock at every party." "Then what do you suggest we do? Should we sell some of our properties to get the $50 million for Cyril?" For a moment, no one responded, and it was completely silent. My father, who had been silent up until now, suddenly spoke. "The $50 million must be paid. We can't lose face as a family." I purposely sneered. "Then why don't you just disown me as your daughter?" My sister-in-law, holding her pregnant belly, muttered under her breath, "At least you know your place." "All right then." My father finally made a decision. They would announce publicly that they were severing ties with me, but it would just be a formality. I would still be their daughter. But I knew this was just a way of placating me. Once the $50 million was paid off, I would be kicked out immediately. But what they didn't know was that this was exactly what I wanted. The next morning at 9 a.m., I got a call from Egbert. "Check your messages. The money should have come through." I quickly opened the message, and sure enough, the money had been deposited 10 minutes ago. "I've received it." Go take care of the annulment today. I'll have the driver pick you up. Egbert, can I ask you a favor? Sure. Can you please not let anyone know about our marriage for now? I didn't want those greedy vultures to attach themselves to Egbert, causing unnecessary trouble for him. You don't want anyone to know. It's not that, just for now. Is that okay? All right. I'll arrange for someone else to pick you up. Once the 50 million was returned to Cyril and my parents announced the severing of ties, if Egbert wanted to make our marriage public or keep it hidden, I would fully cooperate with him at that point. Because they had disowned me first, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble for Egbert, no matter what. After transferring the money to Cyril's account, I took a photo of the payment receipt. When Cyril called, I saw the statement from my family announcing they had cut ties with me. I stared at the few lines of text, reading them over and over again. Then I took a picture and carefully saved it. Cyril's voice sounded hoarse. Where did you get the money? 50 million isn't a small sum. Your parents couldn't come up with it. Who gave it to you? Be clear. That's none of your business. Once you get the money, we'll have no more ties. I was about to hang up, but then Cyril suddenly called my name. Wallace, do you think I care about the 50 million? Whatever your reason is, it's none of my concern. Wallace, you should know that if I don't let go, no man will dare to marry you. I chuckled softly into the phone. Is that so? If you don't believe it, you can always try. I didn't want to waste any more time with him, so I hung up. Just as the call ended, it rang again. I was about to block the number but saw the name on the screen. Egbert? Your family is really cutting ties with you. How do you know? I was surprised. He seemed to know everything. Wallace. If it's hard for you, you don't have to hold it in. I honestly didn't want to cry. I really didn't. But since I was little, I'd gotten used to it, so used to it that I was numb. I'm not upset. But when someone cares about you, you're always a little more vulnerable. So when I spoke, my voice was already filled with tears. You can cry in front of me. After all, starting tomorrow, I'll be your husband. I couldn't hold back my tears. But before becoming your wife, I've arranged another identity for you. What identity? I spoke in a small, timid voice. Egbert was silent for half a minute before saying, so my current identity is a 60-year-old rich foreign businessman, and you're my mistress. Are you mad? He seemed to let out a small sigh on the other end of the line. I'll see you tomorrow. Do you still want to marry me? I could clearly tell he wasn't too happy just now. Rest well today. Wear your prettiest dress tomorrow. Egbert must have made arrangements ahead of time, so the whole marriage registration process went smoothly and quickly. After we got the marriage certificate, Egbert took me to the hospital. He kept holding my hand, and we looked very affectionate. His grandfather was seriously ill and could barely smile at me, but he seemed pleased. I felt a bit uncomfortable inside, having to deceive an elderly man who was about to die. He must have loved his grandson dearly, hoping for a peaceful marriage. But he didn't know I wasn't really Egbert's wife. After leaving the hospital, Egbert had an important meeting, so he had the driver take me home to get my luggage. The driver was a veteran, someone who had watched Egbert grow up. He was old now, his hair and beard all white, but still sharp and energetic. When my family saw him get out of the car and open the door for me, they all assumed he was my sugar daddy. Because they looked down on my mistress status, no one even bothered to talk to me. I carried my suitcase downstairs. Only my father said a few words to me. This is just temporary. You can stay elsewhere for a while. Once things die down, we'll bring you back. I purposely asked pitifully, how long will I have to wait? It depends on the situation. Then the things you promised should still count. don't worry. When I dragged my suitcase out, I could clearly feel the relief in their expressions. The driver took me to Egbert's private residence. The house wasn't too big, but it was peaceful and serene. There were no maids or servants, which made me feel more at ease. "Ma'am, the sir has instructed that you can make yourself at home. He'll be back tonight." But at 8 p.m., I received a call from Egbert. He had to go back to the mainland for a very important meeting and wouldn't be back until a week later. "If you get bored, go out with friends, go shopping, or have some tea. Don't stay cooped up at home all day. I'll stay at my little apartment for a few days. It's close to Central, and everything is convenient there. I'll come pick you up when I get back." "All right." Giving in desire flickered in his eyes for a brief moment. I even had the illusion that Egbert might actually like me. He leaned down again, his movements more forceful. At the very end, I lost consciousness for about seconds, but it didn't hurt like it had when I was ill. Instead, I felt as if I were floating on a cloud surrounded by soft, gentle clouds. Until Egbert woke me up. "Is anything wrong?" I shook my head again, but gently reached out to hold his waist. A woman, when it comes to her first man, seems to have an inherent sense of dependence. Egbert wrapped me in his arms. "Rest for a bit, then we'll take a shower," he said, his fingers resting over my chest. "Is your heart okay?" "Fine." I thought about the pauses in between. Unable to help myself, I asked softly, "Egbert, are you feeling okay?" He cued my face and kissed me, his voice low. "If you keep asking, you'll really make me uncomfortable." "No more." "Okay, no more." He didn't let go of me. "Though I just want to kiss you." I stopped speaking and obediently let him kiss me. In my muddled thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder when he called me one. It felt so affectionate, but a man like him, serious and self-disciplined, would probably only ever say that in bed. I never got the chance to verify my suspicion because the next morning Egbert was out the door early again. I knew he was extremely busy given his position. There were countless matters to take care of, so I stayed at home trying not to add to his troubles. Although I didn't leave the house, the days were quiet and peaceful. It was the first time I felt the beauty of time slowing down. At the age of I didn't have to worry about being sold off like a commodity by my family. I didn't have to be sad because of my parents' biases. I didn't have to think about anything, just doing things that made me happy. I even picked up the piano again after years of neglect, bought an online painting course and started learning oil painting. A week passed in this peaceful stay-at-home routine. One afternoon, Egbert suddenly called and said there was a banquet that evening that I should attend. He had already prepared the dress and jewelry, and a team of stylists would be coming to the soon. "Are you going tonight?" "I'll come find you after I finish." "What's the banquet for?" "Is it a must-attend?" "It's a charity fundraising dinner for children with congenital heart disease." "I thought you'd want to go." I was touched. The last charity event I couldn't attend because of the scandal spread by Stacy was also for children with heart disease. Egbert still remembered that because I had a congenital heart problem. I've always cared deeply about such causes. I remember even after getting engaged to Cyril, I still went to volunteer every month visiting sick or disabled children at the welfare home. But Cyril once mocked me, "You're good at the game of seeking fame," but he didn't know I wasn't doing it for recognition. I just wanted to help more children like me because I knew the pain firsthand. "Egbert, of course I want to go, but if you come tonight, our situation will no longer be hidden." I wanted to ask if this would cause him any trouble or harm his reputation. "You're the one who wanted to keep it low-key from the start, not me." "Egbert," I gripped the phone, a little confused. "I don't understand why. Why did he agree to this? Why had he never considered hiding our marriage? Why was it me?" "I'll answer you when I get home tonight." When I arrived at the banquet, I naturally drew numerous curious stares, but what confused me slightly was, since Egbert was attending such a prestigious charity event, the standard of the event must have been high. Cyril could attend, but no one from my family would be there. Yet there was Cyril and there was my family. When I walked in, they were gathered around Cyril, chatting warmly. My older sister Sylvia looked at Cyril with shy and burning eyes. "Wallace, how dare you show your face here?" Sylvia spoke in surprise. And my mother immediately came over, her face stern. Don't you know what kind of event this is you've come to embarrass us? What will others think of us? I looked at the elegant and poised woman before me, my heart already cold. Weren't we already cut off? So I have no relationship with you anymore. Everyone knows you're my daughter. Then what do you suggest we do? Wallace, leave now. Have your man take you abroad or back to his country. Didn't Dad promise that I could come back after things settled? She looked at me like I was crazy. Are you dreaming? We've already disowned you. Really? Of course it's true. So legally, and in terms of family ties, I have no relationship with any of you. Fine. I turned and looked around. I'm sure everyone has heard what she said. Wallace, you'd better leave quickly. Why? See a scene and make a fool of yourself? Sylvia, feign gentleness. Sirs, here, don't make a joke out of it. At this moment Cyril finally spoke up. Wallace, didn't you say you were getting married? Cyril, that old man is married with kids and has mistresses all over the world. There's no way he'd really marry her. So your IG post the other day was fake? Just as I was about to respond, Cyril stepped forward and grabbed my arm. I'm asking you again. Before I could say anything, the ballroom suddenly fell silent. Mr. Egbert has arrived. Why would he come to such a small gathering? How would I know? But tonight is a real treat to meet the real Mr. Egbert. Why is he heading this way? Oh my God, Mr. Egbert is staring in this direction. Is he looking at Sylvia? Hearing these comments, Sylvia's face quickly turned bright red. My mother also couldn't hide her joy. I turned to look at Egbert. He was still in his black business suit, looking as serious and unapproachable as ever. At this moment I couldn't help but feel a little dazed. The man I had only seen on TV and in the papers, now he was my husband. He had kissed me countless times, called me one onion, and treated me with so much tenderness, like an incredibly loving husband. Wallace Egbert spoke. This was the first time he called my name in front of so many people. Sylvia's smile froze awkwardly. My mother looked stunned. Cyril was even more surprised. I shook off his hand, my eyes red with grievance. Egbert, he walked through the crowd and directly approached me. Your dress is beautiful today. Your makeup is also perfect. You look stunning. I felt like crying and laughing at the same time. As tears were about to fall, Egbert, in front of everyone, pulled me into his arms. All right, I'm just a few minutes late and people start bullying you. When he said the word bullying, his gaze swept indifferently over the crowd. My mother's face turned pale and Sylvia instinctively hid behind her. Egbert's gaze finally landed on Cyril. What were you talking about with my wife? The word wife in Egbert's sentence felt like a bomb. The crowd, which had been silent just moments ago, instantly erupted in whispers. Cyril seemed to still be in disbelief and asked, wife? Yes, Wallace is my wife. Egbert's wife. As soon as Egbert finished speaking, my mother seemed to snap out of her trance. She quickly walked up to me and affectionately grabbed my arm. Why didn't you tell me about this great news? I pushed her hand away. I'm no longer your daughter. She froze for a moment before hastily saying, there's no grudge between a mother and daughter. We just misunderstood. We can clear this up. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. I have no ties to you or your family legally or morally.